Welcome, dear dreamers. I'm Phoenix, and tonight we'll journey to the enchanting world of Japanese folklore, where ancient spirits, mystical creatures, and timeless lessons await. These tales, steeped in the beauty and mystery of Japan's traditions, are perfect for leaving the day's worries behind. As you settle into comfort, let the soothing rhythm of these stories guide you into a peaceful rest. And close your eyes, relax, and let us wander together through the magical landscapes of Japanese mythology. Sweet dreams, and let the stories carry you gently into the night. All you that are true lovers, I beseech you pray the gods for fair weather upon the 7th night of the 7th moon. For patience' sake and for dear love's sake, pray and be pitiful that upon that night there may be neither rain, nor hail, nor cloud, nor thunder, nor creeping mist. Hear the sad tale of the star lovers, and give them your prayers. The weaving maiden was the daughter of a deity of light. Her dwelling was upon the shore of the Milky Way, which is the bright river of heaven. All the day long she sat at her loom and plied her shuttle, weaving the gay garments of the gods. Warp and woof, hour by hour the colored web grew, till it lay fold on fold piled at her feet. Still she never ceased her labor, for she was afraid. She had heard a saying, sorrow, age-long sorrow, shall come upon the weaving maiden when she leaves her loom. So she labored, and the gods had garments to spare. But she herself, poor maiden, was ill-clad. She recked nothing of her attire, or of the jewels that her father gave her. She went barefoot, and let her hair hang down unconfined. Ever and anon a long lock fell upon the loom, and back she flung it over her shoulder. She did not play with the children of heaven, or take her pleasure with celestial youths and maidens. She did not love or weep. She was neither glad nor sorry. She sat weaving, and wove her being into the many-colored web. Now her father, the deity of light, grew angry. He said, "Daughter, you weave too much." "It is my duty," she said. "At your age to talk of duty," said her father. "Out upon you." "Wherefore are you displeased with me, my father?" she said, and her fingers plied the shuttle. "Are you a stalk or a stone or a pale flower by the wayside?" "Nay," she said, "I am none of these." "Then leave your loom, my child, and live, take your pleasure, be as others are." "And wherefore should I be as others are?" she said. "Never dare to question me. Come, will you leave your loom?" She said, "Sorrow, age-long sorrow, shall come upon the weaving maiden when she leaves her loom." "A foolish saying," cried her father, "not worthy of credence. What do we know of age-long sorrow? Are we not gods?" With that he took her shuttle from her hand gently, and covered the loom with a cloth. And he caused her to be very richly attired, and they put jewels upon her, and garlanded her head with flowers of paradise. And her father gave her for spouse the herd boy of heaven, who tended his flocks upon the banks of the bright river. Now the maiden was changed indeed. Her eyes were stars, and her lips were ruddy. She went dancing and singing all the day. Long hours she played with the children of heaven, and she took her pleasure with the celestial youths and maidens. Lightly she went. Her feet were shod with silver. Her lover, as the herd boy, held her by the hand. She laughed, so that the very gods laughed with her, and high heaven re-echoed with sounds of mirth. She was careless. Little did she think of duty or of the garments of the gods. As for her loom, she never went near it from one moon's end to another. I have my life to live, she said. I'll weave it into a web no more. And the herd boy, her lover, clasped her in his arms. Her face was all tears and smiles, and she hid it on his breast. So she lived her life. But her father, the deity of light, was angry. It is too much, he said. Is the girl mad? She will become the laughing stock of heaven. Besides, who is to weave the new spring garments of the gods? 3 times he warned his daughter. 3 times she laughed softly and shook her head. Your hand opened the door, my father, she said, but of a surety no hand either of God or of mortal can shut it. He said, you shall find it otherwise to your cost. And he banished the herd boy for ever and ever to the farther side of the bright river. The magpies flew together from far and near, and they spread their wings for a frail bridge across the river, and the herd boy went over by the frail bridge. And immediately the magpies flew away to the ends of the earth, and the weaving maiden could not follow. She was the saddest thing in heaven. Long, long she stood upon the shore and held out her arms to the herd boy, who tended his oxen desolate and in tears. Long, long she lay and wept upon the sand. Long, long she brooded, looking on the ground. She arose and went to her loom. She cast aside the cloth that covered it. She took her shuttle in her hand. Age-long sorrow, she said. Age-long sorrow. Presently she dropped the shuttle. Ah, she moaned, the pain of it, and she leaned her head against the loom. But in a little while she said, yet I would not be as once I was. I did not love or weep. I was neither glad nor sorry. Now I love and I weep. I am glad and I am sorry. Her tears fell like rain, but she took up the shuttle and labored diligently, weaving the garments of the gods. Sometimes the web was gray with grief, sometimes it was rosy with dreams. The gods were fain to go strangely clad. The maiden's father, the deity of light, for once was well pleased. That is my good, diligent child, he said. Now you are quiet and happy. The quiet of dark despair, she said. Happy, I am the saddest thing in heaven. I am sorry, said the deity of light. What shall I do? Give me back my lover. Nay, child, that I cannot do. He is banished forever and ever by the decree of a deity that cannot be broken. I knew it, she said. Yet something I can do. Listen. On the 7th day of the 7th moon, I will summon the magpies together from the ends of the earth, and they shall be a bridge over the bright river of heaven, so that the weaving maiden shall lightly cross to the waiting herd boy on the farther shore. So it was. On the 7th day of the 7th moon came the magpies from far and near, and they spread their wings for a frail bridge, and the weaving maiden went over by the frail bridge. Her eyes were like stars, and her heart like a bird in her bosom. And the herd boy was there to meet her upon the farther shore. And so it is still, O true lovers, upon the 7th day of the 7th moon, these two keep their tryst. Only if the rain falls with thunder and cloud and hail, and the bright river of heaven is swollen and swift, the magpies cannot make a bridge for the weaving maiden. Alack, the dreary time. Therefore, true lovers, pray the gods for fair weather. Many, many years ago, there lived in Nara, the ancient capital of Japan, a wise state minister by name Prince Toyonari Fujiwara. His wife was a noble, good, and beautiful woman called Princess Murasaki, Violet. They had been married by their respective families, according to Japanese custom, when very young, and had lived together happily ever since. They had, however, one cause for great sorrow, for as the years went by, no child was born to them. This made them very unhappy, for they both longed to see a child of their own who would grow up to gladden their old age, carry on the family name, and keep up the ancestral rites when they were dead. The prince and his lovely wife, after long consultation and much thought, determined to make a pilgrimage to the temple of Hase no Kwannon, goddess of mercy at Hase, for they believed, according to the beautiful tradition of their religion, that the Mother of Mercy, Kwannon, comes to answer the prayers of mortals in the form that they need the most. Surely, after all these years of prayer, she would come to them in the form of a beloved child in answer to their special pilgrimage, for that was the greatest need of their two lives, everything else they had that this life could give them, but it was all as nothing because the cry of their hearts was unsatisfied. So the Prince Toyonari and his wife went to the temple of Kwannon at Hase and stayed there for a long time, both daily offering incense and praying to Kwannon, the Heavenly Mother, to grant them the desire of their whole lives. And their prayer was answered. A daughter was born at last to the Princess Murasaki, and great was the joy of her heart. On presenting the child to her husband, they both decided to call her Hasehimo, or the Princess of Hase, because she was the gift of the Kwannon at that place. They both reared her with great care and tenderness, and the child grew in strength and beauty. When the little girl was 5 years old, her mother fell dangerously ill, and all the doctors and their medicines could not save her. Little before she breathed her last, she called her daughter to her, and gently stroking her head said, "Hasehim, do you know that your mother cannot live any longer? Though I die, you must grow up a good girl. Do your best not to give trouble to your nurse or any other of your family. Perhaps your father will marry again, and someone will fill my place as your mother. If so, do not grieve for me, but look upon your father's second wife as your true mother, and be obedient and filial to both her and your father. Remember when you are grown up to be submissive to those who are your superiors, and to be kind to all those who are under you. Don't forget this. I die with the hope that you will grow up a model woman." Hasehime listened in an attitude of respect while her mother spoke, and promised to do all that she was told. There is a proverb which says, "As the soul is at 3, so it is at 100, and so Hazeheim grew up as her mother had wished, a good and obedient little princess, though she was now too young to understand how great was the loss of her mother. Not long after the death of his first wife, Prince Toyonari married again, a lady of noble birth named Princess Terute. Very different in character, alas, to the good and wise Princess Murasaki. This woman had a cruel, bad heart. She did not love her stepdaughter at all, and was often very unkind to the little motherless girl, saving to herself, "This is not my child. This is not my child." But Hazeheim bore every unkindness with patience, and even waited upon her stepmother kindly, and obeyed her in every way, and never gave any trouble just as she had been trained by her own good mother, so that the Lady Terut had no cause for complaint against her. The little princess was very diligent, and her favorite studies were music and poetry. She would spend several hours practicing every day, and her father had the most proficient of masters he could find to teach her the koto, Japanese harp, the art of writing letters and verse. When she was 12 years of age, she could play so beautifully that she and her stepmother were summoned to the palace to perform before the emperor. It was the festival of the cherry flowers, and there were great festivities at the court. The emperor threw himself into the enjoyment of the season and commanded that Princess Hase should perform before him on the koto, and that her mother, Princess Terut, should accompany her on the flute. The emperor sat on a raised dais, before which was hung a curtain of finely sliced bamboo and purple tassels, so that his majesty might see all and not be seen, for no ordinary subject was allowed to look upon his sacred face. Hase was a skilled musician, though so young, and often astonished her masters by her wonderful memory and talent. On this momentous occasion, she played well. But Princess Terut, her stepmother, who was a lazy woman and never took the trouble to practice daily, broke down in her accompaniment and had to request one of the court ladies to take her place. This was a great disgrace, and she was furiously jealous to think that she had failed where her stepdaughter succeeded, and to make matters worse, the emperor sent many beautiful gifts to the little princess to reward her for playing so well at the palace. There was also now another reason why Princess Terut hated her stepdaughter, for she had had the good fortune to have a son born to her, and in her inmost heart she kept saying, "If only Hase were not here, my son would have all the love of his father." And never having learned to control herself, she allowed this wicked thought to grow into the awful desire of taking her stepdaughter's life. So one day she secretly ordered some poison and poisoned some sweet wine. This poisoned wine she put into a bottle. Into another similar bottle she poured some good wine. It was the occasion of the boys' festival on the 5th of May, and Hase was playing with her little brother. All his toys of warriors and heroes were spread out, and she was telling him wonderful stories about each of them. They were both enjoying themselves and laughing merrily with their attendants when his mother entered with the 2 bottles of wine and some delicious cakes. "You are both so good and happy," said the wicked Princess Terut with a smile, "that I have brought you some sweet wine as a reward, and here are some nice cakes for my good children." And she filled 2 cups from the different bottles. Hase, never dreaming of the dreadful part her stepmother was acting, took one of the cups of wine and gave to her little stepbrother the other that had been poured out for him. The wicked woman had carefully marked the poisoned bottle, but on coming into the room she had grown nervous, and pouring out the wine hurriedly, had unconsciously given the poisoned cup to her own child. All this time she was anxiously watching the little princess, but to her amazement, no change whatever took place in the young girl's face. Suddenly, the little boy screamed and threw himself on the floor, doubled up with pain. His mother flew to him, taking the precaution to upset the 2 tiny jars of wine which she had brought into the room, and lifted him up. The attendants rushed for the doctor, but nothing could save the child. He died within the hour in his mother's arms. Doctors did not know much in those ancient times, and it was thought that the wine had disagreed with the boy, causing convulsions of which he died. Thus was the wicked woman punished in losing her own child when she had tried to do away with her stepdaughter. But instead of blaming herself, she began to hate Hase more than ever in the bitterness and wretchedness of her own heart, and she eagerly watched for an opportunity to do her harm, which was, however, long in coming. When Hase was 13 years of age, she had already become mentioned as a poetess of some merit. This was an accomplishment very much cultivated by the women of old Japan and one held in high esteem. It was the rainy season at Nara, and floods were reported every day as doing damage in the neighborhood. The river Tatsuta, which flowed through the imperial palace grounds, was swollen to the top of its banks, and the roaring of the torrents of water rushing along a narrow bed so disturbed the emperor's rest day and night that a serious nervous disorder was the result. An imperial edict was sent forth to all the Buddhist temples, commanding the priests to offer up continuous prayers to heaven to stop the noise of the flood. But this was of no avail. Then it was whispered in court circles that the Princess Hase, the daughter of Prince Toyonari Fujiwara, second minister at court, was the most gifted poetess of the day, though still so young, and her masters confirmed the report. Long ago, a beautiful and gifted maiden poetess had moved heaven by praying in verse, had brought down rain upon a land famished with drought. So said the ancient biographers of the poetess Ononokomachi. If the Princess Hase were to write a poem and offer it in prayer, might it not stop the noise of the rushing river and remove the cause of the imperial illness? What the court said at last reached the ears of the emperor himself, and he sent an order to the minister Prince Toyonari to this effect. Great indeed was Hasehime's fear and astonishment when her father sent for her and told her what was required of her. Heavy, indeed, was the duty that was laid on her young shoulders, that of saving the emperor's life by the merit of her verse. At last the day came, and her poem was finished. It was written on a leaflet of paper heavily flecked with gold dust. With her father and attendants and some of the court officials, she proceeded to the bank of the roaring torrent, and raising up her heart to heaven, she read the poem she had composed aloud, lifting it heavenwards in her two hands. Strange indeed it seemed to all those standing round. The waters ceased their roaring, and the river was quiet in direct answer to her prayer. After this, the emperor soon recovered his health. His Majesty was highly pleased, and sent for her to the palace, and rewarded her with the rank of Chinjo, that of lieutenant general, to distinguish her. From that time, she was called Chinjo Hime, or the lieutenant general princess, and respected and loved by all. There was only one person who was not pleased at Hasehime's success. That one was her stepmother, forever brooding over the death of her own child, whom she had killed when trying to poison her stepdaughter. She had the mortification of seeing her rise to power and honor, marked by imperial favor and the admiration of the whole court. Her envy and jealousy burned in her heart like fire. Many were the lies she carried to her husband about Hasehime, but all to no purpose. He would listen to none of her tales, telling her sharply that she was quite mistaken. At last, the stepmother, seizing the opportunity of her husband's absence, ordered one of her old servants to take the innocent girl to the Hibari Mountains, the wildest part of the country, and to kill her there. She invented a dreadful story about the little princess, saying that this was the only way to prevent disgrace falling upon the family by killing her. Katoda, her vassal, was bound to obey his mistress. Anyhow, he saw that it would be the wisest plan to pretend obedience in the absence of the girl's father, so he placed Hase in a palanquin and accompanied her to the most solitary place he could find in the wild district. The poor child knew there was no good in protesting to her unkind stepmother at being sent away in this strange manner, so she went as she was told. But the old servant knew that the young princess was quite innocent of all the things her stepmother had invented to him as reasons for her outrageous orders, and he determined to save her life. Unless he killed her, however, he could not return to his cruel taskmistress, so he decided to stay out in the wilderness. With the help of some peasants, he soon built a little cottage, and having sent secretly for his wife to come, these two good old people did all in their power to take care of the now unfortunate princess. She all the time trusted in her father, knowing that as soon as he returned home and found her absent, he would search for her. Prince Toyonari, after some weeks, came home and was told by his wife that his daughter Hime had done something wrong and had run away for fear of being punished. He was nearly ill with anxiety. Everyone in the house told the same story, that Hase had suddenly disappeared. None of them knew why or whither. For fear of scandal, he kept the matter quiet and searched everywhere he could think of, but all to no purpose. One day, trying to forget his terrible worry, he called all his men together and told them to make ready for a several days' hunt in the mountains. They were soon ready and mounted, waiting at the gate for their lord. He rode hard and fast to the district of the Hibari Mountains, a great company following him. He was soon far ahead of everyone, and at last found himself in a narrow, picturesque valley. Looking round and admiring the scenery, he noticed a tiny house on one of the hills quite near, and then he distinctly heard a beautiful, clear voice reading aloud. Seized with curiosity as to who could be studying so diligently in such a lonely spot, he dismounted, and leaving his horse to his groom, he walked up the hillside and approached the cottage. As he drew nearer, his surprise increased, for he could see that the reader was a beautiful girl. The cottage was wide open, and she was sitting facing the view. Listening attentively, he heard her reading the Buddhist scriptures with great devotion. More and more curious, he hurried on to the tiny gate and entered the little garden, and looking up beheld his lost daughter, Hase. She was so intent on what she was saying that she neither heard nor saw her father till he spoke. "Hase, he cried, "it is you, my Hase." Taken by surprise, she could hardly realize that it was her own dear father who was calling her, and for a moment she was utterly bereft of the power to speak or move. My father, it is indeed you, oh my father," was all she could say, and running to him, she caught hold of his thick sleeve, and burying her face, burst into a passion of tears. Her father stroked her dark hair, asking her gently to tell him all that had happened, but she only wept on, and he wondered if he were not really dreaming. Then the faithful old servant Katoda came out, and bowing himself to the ground before his master, poured out the long tale of wrong, telling him all that had happened and how it was that he found his daughter in such a wild and desolate spot, with only 2 old servants to take care of her. The prince's astonishment and indignation knew no bounds. He gave up the hunt at once and hurried home with his daughter. One of the company galloped ahead to inform the household of the glad news, and the stepmother, hearing what had happened, and fearful of meeting her husband now that her wickedness was discovered, fled from the house and returned in disgrace to her father's roof, and nothing more was heard of her. The old servant Katoda was rewarded with the highest promotion in his master's service, and lived happily to the end of his days, devoted to the little princess, who never forgot that she owed her life to this faithful retainer. She was no longer troubled by an unkind stepmother, and her days passed happily and quietly with her father. As Prince Toyonari had no son, he adopted a younger son of one of the court nobles to be his heir, and to marry his daughter, Hase, and in a few years the marriage took place. Hase lived to a good old age, and all said that she was the wisest, most devout, and most beautiful mistress that had ever reigned in Prince Toyonari's ancient house. She had the joy of presenting her son, the future lord of the family, to her father just before he retired from active life. To this day, there is preserved a piece of needlework in one of the Buddhist temples of Kyoto. It is a beautiful piece of tapestry with the figure of Buddha embroidered in the silky threads drawn from the stem of the lotus. This is said to have been the work of the hands of the good Princess Hase. In ancient days, 2 samurai dwelt in Sendai of the north. They were friends and brothers in arms. Hasunuma one was named, and the other Saito. Now it happened that a daughter was born to the house of Hasunuma, and upon the selfsame day, and in the selfsame hour, there was born to the house of Saito a son. The boy child they called Konojo, and the girl they called Aiko, which means the child of love. Or ever a year had passed over their innocent heads, the children were betrothed to one another. And as a token, the wife of Saito gave a golden comb to the wife of Hasunuma, saying, "For the child's hair when she shall be old enough." Aiko's mother wrapped the comb in a handkerchief and laid it away in her chest. It was of gold lacquer, very fine work, adorned with golden dragonflies. This was very well, but before long misfortune came upon Saito and his house, for by sad mischance he aroused the ire of his feudal lord, and he was fain to fly from Sendai by night, and his wife was with him, and the child. No man knew where they went, or had any news of them, nor of how they fared. And for long, long years, Hasunuma heard not one word of them. The child Aiko grew to be the loveliest lady in Sendai. She had longer hair than any maiden in the city, and she was the most graceful dancer ever seen. She moved as a wave of the sea, or a cloud of the sky, or the wild bamboo grass in the wind. She had a sister 11 moons younger than she, who was called Ayame, or the water iris, and she was the second loveliest lady in Sendai. Aiko was white, but Ayame was brown, quick and light and laughing. When they went abroad in the streets of Sendai, folk said, "There go the moon and the south wind." Upon an idle summer day, when all the air was languid and the cicala sang ceaselessly as he swung on the pomegranate bough, the maidens rested on the cool white mats of their lady mother's bower. Their dark locks were loose, and their slender feet were bare. They had between them an ancient chest of red lacquer, a bride box of their lady mothers, and in the chest They searched and rummaged for treasure. "See, sister," said Ayame, "here are scarlet thongs, the very thing for my sandals. And what is this? A crystal rosary, I declare. How beautiful." Aiko said, "My mother, I pray you give me this length of violet silk. It will make me very fine undersleeves to my new gray gown. And mother, let me have the crimson for a petticoat. And surely, mother, you do not need this little bit of brocade." "And what an obi!" cried Ayame, as she dragged it from the chest, grass green and silver. Springing lightly up, she wound the length about her slender body. "Now behold me for the finest lady in all Sendai. Very envious shall be the daughter of the rich Hachiman when she sees this wonder obi. But I shall be calm and careless, and say, looking down thus humbly, 'Your pardon, noble lady, that I wear this foolish trifling obi, unmeet for your great presence. Mother, mother, give me the obi.'" "Ara, ara, little pirates," said the mother and smiled. Aiko thrust her hand to the bottom of the chest. "Here is something hard," she murmured, "a little casket wrapped in a silken handkerchief. How it smells of orris and ancient spices. Now what may it be?" So saying, she unwound the kerchief and opened the casket. "A golden comb," she said, and laid it on her knee. "Give it here, child," cried the mother quickly. "It is not for your eyes." But the maiden sat quite still, her eyes upon the golden comb. It was of gold lacquer, very fine work, adorned with golden dragonflies. For a time, the maiden said not a word, nor did her mother, though she was troubled, and even the light lady of the south wind seemed stricken into silence, and drew the scarlet sandal thongs through and through her fingers. "Mother, what of this golden comb?" said Aiko at last. "My sweet, it is the love token between you and Konojo, the son of Saito, for you two were betrothed in your cradles. But now it is full 15 years since Saito went from Sendai in the night, he and all his house, and left no trace behind." "Is my love dead?" said Aiko. "Nay, that I know not, but he will never come, so I beseech you, think no more of him, my pretty bird. There, get you your fan, and dance for me and for your sister." Aiko first set the golden comb in her hair. Then she flung open her fan to dance. She moved like a wave of the sea, or a cloud of the sky, or the wild bamboo grass in the wind. She had not danced long before she dropped the fan with a long cry, and she herself fell her length upon the ground. From that hour she was in a piteous way, and lay in her bed sighing, like a maid lovelorn and forsaken. She could not eat nor sleep. She had no pleasure in life. The sunrise and the sound of rain at night were nothing to her any more. Not her father, nor her mother, nor her sister, the lady of the south wind, were able to give her any ease. Presently she turned her face to the wall. "It is more than I can understand," she said, and so died. When they had prepared the poor young maid for her grave, her mother came crying to look at her for the last time, and she set the golden comb in the maid's hair, saying, "My own dear little child, I pray that in other lives you may know happiness. Therefore take your golden token with you. You will have need of it when you meet the wraith of your lover." For she believed that Konojo was dead. But alas for karma that is so pitiless. One short moon had the maid been in her grave when the brave young man, her betrothed, came to claim her at her father's house. Alas and alack, Konojo, the son of Saito. Alas, my brave young man, too late you have come. Your joy is turned to mourning, for your bride lies under the green grass, and her sister goes weeping in the moonlight to pour the water of the dead. Thus spoke Hasunuma the samurai. Lord, said the brave young man, there are 3 ways left: the sword, the strong girdle, and the river. These are the short roads to Yomi. Farewell. But Hasunuma held the young man by the arm. Nay then, thou son of Saito, he said, but hear the 4th way, which is far better. The road to Yomi is short, but it is very dark. Moreover, from the confines of that country few return. Therefore stay with me, Konojo, and comfort me in my old age, for I have no sons. So Konojo entered the household of Hasunuma, the samurai, and dwelt in the garden house by the gate. Now in the 3rd month, Hasunuma and his wife and the daughter that was left them arose early, and dressed them in garments of ceremony, and presently were borne away in Keigo, for to the temple they were bound, and to their ancestral tombs, where they offered prayers and incense the livelong day. It was bright starlight when they returned, and cold the night was, still and frosty. Konojo stood and waited at the garden gate. He waited for their homecoming, as was meet. He drew his cloak about him and gave ear to the noises of the evening. He heard the sound of the blind man's whistle and the blind man's staff upon the stones. Far off he heard a child laugh twice. Then he heard men singing in chorus, as men who sing to cheer themselves in their labor, and in the pauses of song he heard the creak of swinging Keigo that the men bore upon their shoulders, and he said, They come. I go to the house of the beloved. Her plum tree stands by the eaves. It is full of blossom. The dew lies in the heart of the flowers, so they are the drinking cups of the sparrows. How do you go to your love's house, even upon the wings of the night wind? Which road leads to your love's house? All the roads in the world. This was the song of the Keigo men. First the Keigo of Hasunuma, the samurai, turned in at the garden gate. Then followed his lady. Last came Ayame of the south wind. Upon the roof of her Keigo there lay a blossoming bough. Rest well, lady, said Konojo, as she passed, and had no answer back. Howbeit it seemed that some light thing dropped from the Keigo, and fell with a little noise to the ground. He stooped and picked up a woman's comb. It was of gold lacquer, very fine work, adorned with golden dragonflies. Smooth and warm, it lay in the hand of Konojo, and he went his way to the garden house. At the hour of the rat, the young samurai threw down his book of verse, laid himself upon his bed, and blew out his light. And the self-same moment he heard a wandering step without. And who may it be that visits the garden house by night? Said Konojo, and he wondered. About and about went the wandering feet till at length they stayed, and the door was touched with an uncertain hand. Konojo, Konojo. What is it? Said the samurai. Open, open, I am afraid. Who are you, and why are you afraid? I am afraid of the night. I am the daughter of Hasunuma, the samurai. Open to me for the love of the gods. Konojo undid the latch and slid back the door of the garden house to find a slender and drooping lady upon the threshold. He could not see her face, for she held her long sleeve so as to hide it from him. but she swayed and trembled, and her frail shoulders shook with sobbing. "Let me in," she moaned, and forthwith entered the garden house. Half smiling and much perplexed, Kanojo asked her, "Are you Ayame, whom they call the Lady of the South Wind?" "I am she." "Lady, you do me much honor." "The comb," she said, "the golden comb." As she said this, she threw the veil from her face, and taking the robe of Kanojo in both her little hands, she looked into his eyes as though she would draw forth his very soul. The lady was brown and quick and light. Her eyes and her lips were made for laughing, and passing strange she looked in the guise that she wore then. "The comb," she said, "the golden comb." "I have it here," said Konojo. "Only let go my robe, and I will fetch it you." At this the lady cast herself down upon the white mats in a passion of bitter tears, and Konojo, poor unfortunate, pressed his hands together, quite beside himself. "What to do?" he said. "What to do?" At last he raised the lady in his arms and stroked her little hand to comfort her. "Lord," she said as simply as a child, "Lord, do you love me?" And he answered her in a moment, "I love you more than many lives, O Lady of the South Wind." "Lord," she said, "will you come with me then?" He answered her, "Even to the land of Yomi," and took her hand. Forth they went into the night, and they took the road together. By riverside they went, and over plains of flowers. They went by rocky ways, or through the whispering pines, and when they had wandered far enough, of the green bamboos they built them a little house to dwell in. And they were there for a year of happy days and nights. Now, upon a morning of the 3rd month, Kanojo beheld men with Keigo come swinging through the bamboo grove, and he said, "What have they to do with us, these men and their Keigo?" "Lord," said Ayame, "they come to bear us to my father's house." He cried, "What is this foolishness? We will not go." "Indeed, and we must go," said the lady. "Go you then," said Konojo. "As for me, I stay here where I am happy." "Ah, Lord," she said. "Ah, my dear, do you then love me less, who vowed to go with me, even to the land of Yomi?" Then he did all that she would, and he broke a blossoming bough from a tree that grew nearby and laid it upon the roof of her Keigo. Swiftly, swiftly they were born, and the Keigo men sang as they went, a song to make labor light. "I go to the house of the beloved. Her plum tree stands by the eaves. It is full of blossom. The dew lies in the heart of the flowers, so they are the drinking cups of the sparrows. How do you go to your love's house? Even upon the wings of the night wind. Which road leads to your love's house? All the roads in the world." This was the song of the Keigo men. About nightfall they came to the house of Hasunuma, the samurai. "Go you in, my dear lord," said the Lady of the South Wind. "I will wait without. If my father is very wroth with you, only show him the golden comb." And with that she took it from her hair and gave it him. Smooth and warm it lay in his hand. Then Konojo went into the house. "Welcome, welcome home, Konojo, son of Saito," cried Hasunuma. "How has it fared with your nightly adventure?" Knightly adventure, said Kanajo and blushed. It is a year since your sudden departure, and we supposed that you had gone upon a quest, or in the expiation of some vow laid upon your soul. Alas, my good lord, said Konojo, I have sinned against you and against your house. And he told Hasunuma what he had done. When he had made an end of his tale, Boy, said the samurai, you jest, but your merry jest is ill-timed. Know that my child lies even as one dead. For a year she has neither risen, nor spoken, nor smiled. She is visited by a heavy sickness, and none can heal her. Sir, said Konojo, your child, the lady of the south wind, waits in a kago without your garden wall. I will fetch her in presently. Forth they went together, the young man and the samurai, but they found no kago without the garden wall, no kago bearers, and no lady. Only a broken bough of withered blossom lay upon the ground. Indeed, indeed, she was here but now, cried Konojo. She gave me her comb, her golden comb. See, my lord, here it is. What comb is this, Konojo? Where got you this comb that was set in a dead maid's hair, and buried with her beneath the green grass? Where got you the comb of Aiko, the lady of the moon, that died for love? Speak, Konojo, son of Saito. This is a strange thing. Now whilst Konojo stood amazed, and leaned silent and bewildered against the garden wall, a lady came lightly through the trees. She moved as a wave of the sea, or a cloud of the sky, or the wild bamboo grass in the wind. Ayame, cried the samurai, how are you able to leave your bed? The young man said nothing, but fell on his knees beside the garden wall. There the lady came to him and bent so that her hair and her garments overshadowed him, and her eyes held his. Lord, she said, I am the spirit of Aiko, your love. I went with a broken heart to dwell with the shades of Yomi. The very dead took pity on my tears. I was permitted to return, and for one short year to inhabit the sweet body of my sister. And now my time is come. I go my ways to the great country. I shall be the happiest soul in Yomi. I have known you, beloved. Now take me in your arms, for I grow very faint. With that she sank to the ground, and Konojo put his arms about her and laid her head against his heart. His tears fell upon her forehead. Promise me, she said, that you will take to wife Ayame, my sister, the lady of the south wind. Ah, he cried, my lady and my love. Promise, promise, she said. Then he promised. After a little, she stirred in his arms. What is it? He said, so soft her voice that it did not break the silence but floated upon it. The comb, she murmured, the golden comb, and Konojo set it in her hair. A burden, pale but breathing, Konojo carried into the house of Hasunuma and laid upon the white mats and silken cushions. And after 3 hours, a young maid sat up and rubbed her sleepy eyes. She was brown and quick and light and laughing. Her hair was tumbled about her rosy cheeks, unconfined by any braid or comb. She stared first at her father and then at the young man that was in her bower. She smiled, then flushed, and put her little hands before her face. Greeting, O lady of the south wind, said Konojo. In the days of the gods, Amano Hashidate was the floating bridge of heaven. By way of this bridge came the deities from heaven to earth, bearing their jeweled spears, their great bows, and heavenly feathered arrows, their wonder robes, and their magic mirrors. Afterwards, when the direct way was closed that had been between earth and heaven, and the deities walked no more upon the land of fresh rice ears, the people still called a place Amano Hashidate for the sake of happy memory. This place is one of the three fair views of Yamato. It is where a strip of land runs out into the blue sea, like a floating bridge covered with dark pine trees. There was a holy man of Kyoto called Sion Zenji. He had followed the way of the gods from his youth up. He was also a disciple of the great Buddha. Well versed was he in doctrines and philosophies. He knew the perils of illusion and the ineffable joys of nirvana. Long hours would he pass in mystic meditation, and many of the scriptures he had by heart. When he was on a pilgrimage, he came to Amano Hashidate, and he offered up thanks because the place was so lovely in his eyes. He said, "The blind and ignorant have it that trees and rocks and the green seawater are not sentient things, but the wise know that they also sing aloud and praise the Tathagata. Here will I take up my rest and join my voice with theirs, and will not see my home again." So Sion Zenji, the holy man, climbed Narrate, the mountain over against Amano Hashidate, and when he had come to the place of the lone pine, he built him a shrine to Kwannon the merciful, and a hut to cover his own head. All day he chanted the holy sutras. From dawn to eventide he sang, till his very being was exalted and seemed to float in an ecstasy of praise. Then his voice grew so loud and clear that it was a marvel. The blue campanula of the mountain in reverence bowed its head. The great white lily distilled incense from its deep heart. The cicala shrilled aloud. The forsaken bird gave a long note from the thicket. About the hermit's hut there fluttered dragonflies and butterflies innumerable, which are the souls of the happy dead. In the far valleys, the peasant people were comforted in their toil, whether they planted out the green young rice or gathered in the ears. The sun and the wind were tempered, and the rain fell softly upon their faces. Ever and again they climbed the steep hillside to kneel at the shrine of Kwannon the Merciful, and to speak with the holy man, whose wooden bowl they would fill with rice or millet, or barley meal or beans. Sometimes he came down and went through the villages, where he soothed the sick and touched the little children. Folks said that his very garments shone. Now in that country there came a winter season, the like of which there had not been within the memory of man. First came the wind blowing wildly from the north, and then came the snow in great flakes, which never ceased to fall for the period of 9 days. All the folk of the valleys kept within doors, as warm as might be, and those that had their winter stores fared none so ill. But ah me, for the bitter cold upon the heights of Narrate. At the lone pine and about the hermit's hut, the snow was piled and drifted. The shrine of Kwannon the Merciful could no more be seen. Sion Zenji, the holy man, lived for some time upon the food that was in his wooden bowl. Then he drew about him the warm garment of thought, and passed many days in meditation, which was meat and drink and sleep to him. Howbeit, even his clear spirit could not utterly dispel the clouds of illusion. At length it came to earth, and all the man trembled with bodily weakness. "Forgive me, O Kwannon the Merciful," said Sion Zenji, "but verily it seems to me that if I have no food, I die. Slowly he rose, and painfully he pushed open the door of his hut. The snow had ceased. It was clear and cold. White were the branches of the lone pine, and all white the floating bridge. "Forgive me, O Kwannon the Merciful," said Sion Zenji. "I know not the reason, but I am loath to depart and be with the shades of Yomi. Save me this life, O Kwannon the Merciful." Turning, he beheld a dappled hind lying on the snow, newly dead of the cold. He bowed his head. "Poor gentle creature," he said, "never more shalt thou run in the hills and nibble the grass and the sweet flowers." And he stroked the hind's soft flank, sorrowing. "Poor dear, I would not eat thy flesh. Is it not forbidden by the law of the Blessed One? Is it not forbidden by the word of Kwannon the Merciful?" Thus he mused. But even as he mused, he seemed to hear a voice that spoke to him, and the voice said, "Alas, Sion Zenji, if thou die of hunger and cold, what shall become of my people, the poor folk of the valleys? Shall they not be comforted any more by the sutras of the Tathagata? Break the law to keep the law, beloved thou that countest the world well lost for a divine song." Then presently, Sion Zenji took a knife and cut him a piece of flesh from the side of the dappled hind, and he gathered fir cones and made a little fire and cooked the deer's flesh in an iron pot. When it was ready, he ate half of it, and his strength came to him again, and he opened his lips and sang praises to the Tathagata, and the very embers of the dying fire leapt up in flame to hear him. "Howbeit I must bury the poor deer," said Sion Zenji. So he went to the door of his hut, but look where he might, no deer nor dappled hind did he see, nor yet the mark of one in the deep snow. "It is passing strange," he said, and wondered. As soon as might be, up came the poor folk from the valley to see how their hermit had fared through the snow and the stormy weather. "The gods send he be not dead of cold or hunger," they said one to another. But they found him chanting in his hut, and he told them how he had eaten of the flesh of a dappled hind and was satisfied. "I cut but a hand's breadth of the meat," he said, "and half of it is yet in the iron pot." But when they came to look in the pot, they found there no flesh of deer, but a piece of cedar wood gilded upon the one side. Marveling greatly, they carried it to the shrine of Kwannon the Merciful, and when they had cleared away the deep snow, all of them went in to worship. There smiled the image of the sweet, heavenly lady, golden among her golden flowers. In her right side there was a gash where the gilded wood was cut away. Then the poor folk from the valley reverently brought that which they had found in the hermit's pot and set it in the gash. And immediately the wound was healed, and the smooth gold shone over the place. All the people fell on their faces, but the hermit stood singing the high praise of Kwannon the Merciful. The sun set in glory. The valley folk crept softly from the shrine and went down to their own homes. The cold moon and the stars shone upon the lone pine and the floating bridge and the sea. Through a rent in the shrine's roof, they illumined the face of Kwannon the Merciful and made visible her manifold arms of love. Yet Sion Zenji, her servant, stood before her singing in an ecstasy with tears upon his face. "O Wonder Woman, strong and beautiful, tender-hearted, pitiful, and thousand-armed, thou hast fed me with thine own flesh. Mystery of mysteries, poor dead dappled hind thou camest to me. In the deep of mine own heart thou spoke to me, to keep yet break, and breaking keep thy law, mystery of mysteries. Kwannon, the merciful lady, stay with me, save me from the perils of illusion. Let me not be afraid of the snow or the lone pine. Mystery of mysteries, thou hast refused nirvana. Help me that I may lose the world, content, and sing the divine song. It was a deity from high heaven that planted the pine tree, so long ago that the crane cannot remember it, and the tortoise knows it only by hearsay from his great-grandmother, the heavenly deity descended. Lightly, lightly he came by way of the floating bridge, bearing the tree in his right hand. Lightly, lightly his feet touched the earth. He said, I have come to the land of the reed plains. I have come to the land of fresh rice ears. It is a good land. I am satisfied. And he planted the pine tree within the sound of the sea at Takasaga, which is in the province of Harima. Then he went up again to high heaven by way of the floating bridge. But the pine tree flourished, so great it grew. There was not a greater in all the land of the reed plains. Its trunk was rosy red, and beneath it spread a brown carpet of fallen needles. In the sweet nights of summer, the children of the woods came hand in hand to the pine tree by moonlight, slipping their slim dark feet upon the moss and tossing back their long green hair. The children of the water came by moonlight, all drenching wet their sleeves, and the bright drops fell from their fingertips. The children of the air rested in the pine tree's branches and made murmuring music all the livelong night. The children of the sea. Foam crept up the yellow sands, and from the confines of Yomi came the mysteries, the sounds, and the scents of the dark. With faces veiled and thin gray forms, they came, and they hung upon the air about the place where the pine tree was, so that the place was holy and haunted. Lovers wandering upon the beach at Takasaga would hear the great company of spirits singing together. Joy of my heart, they said to one another, do you hear the wind in the pine tree? Poor souls lying sick abed would listen, and fishermen far out at sea would pause in their labor to whisper, the wind in the pine tree, how the sound carries over the water. As for the coming of the maiden, the crane cannot remember it, but the tortoise has it of his great-grandmother that she was born of poor parents in Takasaga. The maiden was brown and tall and slender, in face and form most lovely. Her hair hung down to her knees. She rose at dawn to help her mother. She found sticks for the fire. She drew water at the well. She could spin and weave with the best, and for long, long hours she sat and plied her wheel or her shuttle in the shade of the great pine tree, whilst her ears heard the sound of the wind in its branches. Sometimes her eyes looked out over the paths of the sea, as one who waits and watches. She was calm, not restless, more grave than gay, though she smiled not seldom. Her voice was the voice of a heavenly being. Now concerning the youth from the far province, of him the crane knows something, for the crane is a great traveler. She was flying over the streams and the valleys of the far province, so she says when she saw the youth at work in the green rice fields. The crane lingered, circling slowly in the bright air. The youth stood up. He looked round upon the valleys and streams. He looked into the sky. I hear the call, he said. I may tarry no longer. Voice in my heart, I hear and I obey. With that he left the rice field and bade farewell to his mother and his father and his sisters and his brothers and his friends. all together, they came down to the seashore, weeping and clinging to each other. The youth took a boat and went away to sea, and the rest of them stood upon the beach. On sped the boat for many a day over the unknown paths of the sea, and the white crane flew behind the boat. And when the wind failed, she pushed the boat forward with the wind of her strong wings. At last, one evening about the hour of sunset, the youth heard the sound of sweet singing. The sound came to him from the land, and it traveled over the paths of the sea. He stood up in his boat, and the crane beat her strong white wings and guided his boat to the shore till its keel touched the yellow sand of the sea beach of Takasaga. When the youth had come ashore, he pushed the boat out again with the waves and watched it drift away. Then he turned his face inland. The sound of music was still in his ears. The voice was like the voice of a heavenly being, and strange and mystical were the words of the song. The lover brought a love gift to his mistress, jewels of jade upon a silken string, well-carved jewels, well-rounded jewels, green as the grass, upon a silken string. The jewels know not one another, the string they know. Oh, the strength of the silken string! The youth went inland and came to the great pine tree and to the maid that sat beneath, weaving diligently and singing. The crane came flying with her strong white wings and perched upon the tree's topmost branches. The tortoise lay below on the brown carpet of needles. He watched and saw much with his little eyes, but he said nothing, being very silent by nature. The youth stood before the maiden, waiting. "Whence come you?" she said, lifting up her eyes. "I have come across the sea path. I have come from afar." "And wherefore came you?" "That you must know best, seeing it was your voice that sang in my heart." "Do you bring me the gift?" she said. "Indeed, I bring you the complete gift, jewels of jade upon a silken string." "Come," she said, and rose and took him by the hand, and they went to her father's house. So they drank the 3 times 3, and were made man and wife, and lived in sweet tranquility many, many years. All the time the crane dwelt in the pine tree's topmost branches, and the tortoise on the brown carpet of needles below. At last, the youth and maiden that once were became white-haired, old, and withered by the swift, relentless passage of years. "Fair love," said the old man, "how weary I grow. It is sad to be old." "Say not so, dear delight of my heart," said the old woman. "Say not so, the best of all is to come." "My dear," said the old man, "I have a desire to see the great pine tree before I die, and to listen once more to the song of the wind in its branches." "Come then," she said, and rose and took him by the hand. Old and faint and worn, with feeble, tottering steps, and hand in hand they came. "How faint I grow," said the old man. "Ah, I am afraid. How dark it is. Hold you my hand." "I have it fast in mine. There, lie down, dear love. Be still and listen to the wind in the pine tree." He lay on the soft brown bed beneath the pine tree's boughs, and the wind sang. She who was his love and his wife bent over him and sheltered him, and he suffered the great change. Then he opened his eyes and looked at her. She was tall and straight and slender, in face and form most lovely, and each of them was young as the gods are young. He put out his hand and touched her. "Your long black hair," he said. Once more she bade him, "Come." Lightly they left the ground. To the sound of the wind's music they swayed, they floated, they rose into the air. Higher they rose and higher. The branches of the pine tree received them, and they were no more seen. Still, in the sweet nights of summer, the children of the woods come hand in hand to the pine tree by moonlight, slipping their slim dark feet upon the moss and tossing back their long green hair. The children of the water come by moonlight, all drenching wet their sleeves, and the bright drops fall from their fingertips. The children of the air rest in the pine tree's branches and make murmuring music all the livelong night. The children of the sea, foam creep up the yellow sands, and from the confines of Yomi come the mysteries, the sounds, and the scents of the dark. With faces veiled and thin gray forms, they come and they hang upon the air about the place where the pine tree is, so that the place is holy and haunted. Lovers wandering upon the beach at Takasaga hear the great company of spirits singing together. "Joy of my heart," they say to one another, "do you hear the wind in the pine tree?"